We are about to enter a dangerous time in history. You have been warned. The year is 1822, and the Mexican government has given Moses Austin the first land grant to settle Texas. 300 families have been permitted to settle. Families were to settle along the Brazos River. Moses Austin died after getting the land grant, but before he died, he passed the job of leading the families into Texas to his son Stephen Austin. The 300 families settled in Texas to farm and ranch. Stephen Austin was a man who didn't like to fight. He believed in peace and negotiations. He was thrown in jail by the Mexican government. When he got out of jail, he went to the U.S. to gather troops and supplies. He missed most of the war, and when he got back to Texas, the Texans had won the war already. It was a rough time in the Mexican government. General Austin de Iturbide was emperor first. He was overthrown and executed. Guadalupe Victoria became president, and then Vincent Guerrero. Guerrero was overthrown and executed. Next was Anastasio Bustamante. He wrote a law that there were to be no more Americans immigrating into Texas. Santa Anna overthrew Bustamante. Tensions were rising, and it was only a matter of time before it exploded into total war. The war started with a series of fights. First one being where Jim Bowie and 20 men captured 200 Mexican soldiers. Jim Bowie was very well known for surviving a very deadly fight called the Sandbar Fight. It started as a duel that turned into a skirmish. He came out of the fight with 2 bullet holes, one in the leg, one in the lung, 7 sword slashes, one through the left hand, along with a bludgeon wound on the head. Jim Bowie was probably most famous for his knife, which became known as the Bowie knife. His knife was over 9 inches long and 1 inch wide. Jim Bowie was also well known for his many adventures. Bowie fought in plenty of battles in the Texan Revolution. While at the Alamo, Bowie became sick. When the battle happened, legend says that Bowie fought back with 2 pistols. Jim Bowie died in his bed. The Mexicans retaliated with the slaughtering of Zacatecas militia and ransacking of Zacatecas. In June 1835, William Travis took a schooner and attacked Fort Anahuac outside the town of San Philip. William Barrett Travis was a lawyer who played a big role in the Texas Revolution as a soldier and leader. He was one of the sparks that started the Texas Revolution. He died at the beginning of the Battle of the Alamo. He was shot in the head by a musket ball. Soon after, the San Philip incident was the first naval battle of the Texan Revolution. In the battle, 2 Texan schooners, one named San Philip, went up against a Mexican warship. The Texans won the battle. Next, the Texans raided the Mexican armory in Nacogdoches and took their weapons for themselves. Gonzalez had a cannon, and the Mexican army wanted it. When the Mexicans arrived to take the cannon, the Texans took them by surprise and fired the cannon. 2 Mexican soldiers were killed in that skirmish. At 6 a.m. on October 28, 1835, a group of 90 Texans, led by Jim Bowie and James Fannin, attacked 275 soldiers and a cannon in the Battle of Concepcion. The battle took place on the grounds of Mission Concepcion. Texans took cover in a horseshoe-shaped ravine, while the Mexicans were stuck in the open field. The Texans had rifles, while the Mexicans had Brown Bess muskets. The Texan rifles were effective at 3 times the range than the Mexican muskets. The Mexican powder and musket balls were no good either. The musket balls would hit the Texans and only leave a bruise. Also, the Texans were not hungry during the battle, because the Mexican soldiers were firing over the ravine and knocking nuts out of the trees, and the Texans were eating them. The Texans won the battle. The Texans had 1 man dead and 1 wounded, while the Mexicans had between 14 and 76 dead and 39 wounded. The Texans also captured the Mexican cannon. In October, the Texans rebels launched a key siege on the town of San Antonio de Bexar. Bexar was located right next to the Alamo, and there were 1,200 Mexican soldiers in the town. Another one of Jim Bowie's adventures occurred when the Texans thought that there was a Mexican treasure train. The Texans attacked the treasure train because they wanted the treasure, and they wanted to stop the supplies from going into San Antonio de Bexar. But it turned out to be a feed patrol for General Cross's horses. The Texans captured the hay and were a little disappointed when they found out that all they got was hay. The skirmish is known as the Grass Fight. On December 4th, 1835, the siege was called to an end for the winter. But one old man didn't like this. His name was Ben Milam, and he got the men in the siege to attack the town. The Texans attacked Bexar from 2 spots, and the Texan riders circled the town to keep the Mexicans from escaping. The Texans fought through the town street by street and smashed holes in the walls to get through. The Texans fought for 4 days. On the 4th day, Ben Milam was scouting the final approach when a Mexican sniper shot him. Ben died instantly. During the fighting in Bexar, General Cross left the Alamo and attacked the Texan base on Cibolo Creek. The Mexicans were repelled by the Texan cannons and forced to retreat back to the Alamo. The Mexicans were forced to surrender the battle. General Cross was allowed to return to Mexico with his remaining troops. Once the Texans captured the Alamo, many of them went to capture the town of Matamoros, which received $100,000 every month from shipping. James Neal was left in charge of the Alamo. Some of the people that went to Matamoros quit the mission. When the remaining Texans attacked Matamoros, it turned out to be a trap, and almost all of them were killed or captured. On January 19th, Jim Bowie arrived at the Alamo. Once again arrived soon after. Once again was a skilled cavalryman who fought in many battles. He had a group of cavalrymen who served under him. On February 3rd, William Travis and Davy Crockett arrived at the Alamo, bringing more volunteers. The Texans began fortifying the Alamo. Davy Crockett was probably one of the best-known frontiersmen that there was. He was best known as a bear hunter and congressman. Davy did not do well in Congress, so Davy said to the rest of Congress, "You may all go to hell, and I will go to Texas." So Davy Crockett did what he said he would do. He took some of his Tennessee volunteers and went to Texas. Davy Crockett fought and died at the Alamo, no one is sure quite how. He may have been captured and executed. Some say that he was found with the bodies of 16 Mexican soldiers that he had killed. In the daytime, they fortified the Alamo, and at night they went to fandangos in Bexar. Meanwhile, the Mexicans prepared to march the 360-mile journey to the Alamo. It was the dead of winter, and many of the Mexicans were wearing sandals. It snowed while they marched, and many soldiers deserted. On February 23rd, the Mexicans were spotted. 1,500 were seen marching into Bexar. Santa Anna was furious with the Texans. He was angered in many ways. First, the Texans put up the 1824 flag at the Alamo, which is an insult to his presidency. Next, they sent a parley invitation letter that was signed Doisy, Texas, which was not the right way to sign a letter. Lastly, they fired first on Santa Anna with their 18-pounder gun. The Mexicans put up a flag. It was red, which meant no quarter. They planned to kill all the Texans. The Mexicans began bombarding the Alamo the next day. The Mexicans' heavy cannons hadn't arrived yet, so their light guns didn't do much damage. Many cannonballs landed in the main plaza, hitting nothing. The Texans fired them right back at the Mexicans. On February 25th, 200 to 300 Mexican troops began advancing on the Alamo, using some old wood houses for cover. 2 brave Texans sprinted out of the Alamo and burnt the houses. Bullets whizzed and flew around those 2 brave Texans, but both of them made it back to the cover of the Alamo. The same day, once again, left the Alamo with letters asking for help and reinforcements. On March 1st, 32 more soldiers entered the Alamo from Gonzales, bringing their numbers up to 250 soldiers. By March 3rd, the Alamo was completely surrounded by the Mexican army. That day, what happened in the Alamo is lost to the waters of history. But as the legend goes, William Travis told his men that he was going to fight and die in the Alamo. Travis drew a line in the sand and told his men that whoever crossed this line would stay and fight and die in the Alamo. All the men in the Alamo crossed the line but one. Moses Rose did not cross the line. Moses had seen enough battles. He had fought under Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars. Moses ran off into the night. Now, some people think that Moses did not exist at all. Santa Anna decided not to wait for the big guns. He decided to attack with all his soldiers and overwhelm the Texans. On March 6th, at 5:30 a.m., the Mexicans attacked. The Texans fought bravely, but they were heavily outnumbered. Hundreds of the Mexicans were killed. By 6:30 a.m., the battle was over. Mexican deaths ranged from 300 to 2,000. All the Texans were killed. Soldiers from Galia tried to make it to the Alamo, but they had a few problems. First, their supply wagon got stuck in the mud. Then, their oxen ran off. And finally, a Mexican army was sighted headed to Galia, where they were stationed. Colonel Fannin was the commander of the Texan troops at Galia. Fannin and his men burned any supplies that wouldn't fit in the wagons and retreated from Galia. Fannin's men were barely out of Galia when the Mexican army caught up with them. The Mexican army outnumbered the Texans and forced them to surrender. The Texans were brought back to Galia. After orders from Santa Anna, they were all executed. 350 Texans were executed in what is now known as the Galia Massacre. The rest of the Texan army retreated across Texas, led by Sam Houston. Sam Houston was a great leader who led the Texan army to victory at San Jacinto. At the Battle of San Jacinto, Sam had 2 horses shot out from under him and was hit in the ankle with a musket ball. The Texans fled for a long time. When they learned that Santa Anna had split his forces and was outnumbered, they decided to attack. The Texans attacked the Mexicans on April 21st, 1836, at the San Jacinto River. The Texans were getting ready to fight when General Cross arrived, doubling Santa Anna's forces. The Texans attacked before the Mexicans were organized. The Battle of San Jacinto lasted 20 minutes. The remaining Mexican troops retreated through the march to Peggy's Lake. Many of the Mexicans threw down their guns and tried to surrender, but the Texan soldiers killed most of the Mexicans in a massacre. Some of the Texan officers, including Sam Houston, tried to stop their men from killing the Mexicans, but to no avail. 600 of the Mexicans were killed, and 700 were captured. Santa Anna ran and hid after the battle. He was caught wearing the uniform of a common soldier. When Texas became a country, Sam Houston became president. In 1845, Texas joined the U.S. as a state. 2 good books you can read to get more information about the Texan Revolution are Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, Alamo All-Stars, and Inside the Alamo by Jim Murphy.